The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 10, Session 21, February 10th, 1981. Jim. As we were preparing to welcome Dr. Puharich into our circle of working with Ra, we were reminded once again of the prerequisite of the tuning in the personal life that was necessary for all of those involved in the contact. Carla. In the event, Andreja never visited us here in Kentucky, but it is worth noting that Ra frequently did respond to our questions by invoking the law of confusion. Those of Ra felt that the primary importance in personal ethics of allowing people to do their own learning, make their own mistakes, cannot be overemphasized. Session 21, February 10th, 1981. Questioner. Andreja Puharich will be visiting later this month. Can he read the unpublished healing material? Ra. I am Ra. The entity of whom you speak has a knowledge of this material in its conscious memory in somewhat altered form. Therefore, it is harmless to allow this entity to become acquainted with this material. However, we request the mind-body-spirit complex, Henry, be sufficiently prepared by means of meditation, contemplation, or prayer before entering these workings. At present, as we have said before, this mind-body-spirit complex is not of proper vibrational distortion. Questioner. I had already determined to exclude him from these workings. I had only determined to let him read the material. The only other thing that I have noticed within the material as it exists now, there is a certain statement that will allow him to understand who I believe Spectra really was. It seems to be my duty to remove this from his knowledge to preserve the same free will that you attempted to preserve by not naming the origin of the Spectra contact in Israel. Am I correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is a matter for your discretion. Questioner. That's what I thought you'd say. The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 11, Session 22, February 10th, 1981. Jim. Most of the personal information from Session 22 is self-explanatory. The prayer that Ra speaks of in relation to Carla is the prayer of St. Francis, which Carla has used as her own personal tuning mechanism since she began channeling in 1974. It further refines the tuning done by the support group and is always prayed mentally before any session, whether telepathic or trance. The limitations which Ra speaks of in the second answer refers to Carla's rheumatoid arthritis, which was apparently chosen before the incarnation to provide an inner focus for her meditative work rather than allow the ease of outer expression that might have dissipated the inner orientation. Thus, not all disabilities are meant to yield to even the best efforts of healers, and when such a disability does not respond to any kind of healing effort, one may begin to consider what opportunities for learning and service are opened up by the disability. Ra even mentioned in the last sentence that her acceptance of her disabilities and limitations would ease the amount of pain that she suffered because of them. Carla. It was distinctly odd to be going about and walking into aromas which had no overt origin. It seemed to me throughout this time that I was being more and more sensitized and less vibrating with my humanhood. I feel sure that the constant weight loss added to this Alice in Wonderland feeling. To the present day, I continue to have a very sensitized physical vehicle. However, my formerly tiny body has grown from size pre-teen 5 to 8 to its present position athwart 14 to 16, a weight gain of double the lightest weight reached during the contact. Just for a feel of where normal is for me, I used to weigh between 115 and 120 year after year. I looked quite normal at that weight. It's been interesting to feel the different weights I have been to live with a more or less bulky vehicle. One feels stronger the heavier one is. I was surprised at this, figuring that lighter weights would make one feel more toned and vital. It makes it easier to understand why we in America so often allow ourselves to eat to the point of obesity, It feels good. One doubts that it is a life-lengthening thing, however. The pre-incarnative choice which I made to have a body that would limit what I could do is one I have taken a long time to appreciate. It is frustrating at first not to be able to do the work one's trained to do. I loved being a librarian. I enjoyed researching for Don. When I could no longer work in these ways, I was so profoundly puzzled and not a little upset. But then, quiet years taught me so much. I learned the open heart, although my body was declining. I found hope and faith, although the physical picture grew steadily worse. After Donald died, I came close to dying too, and in 1992, when at last I was able to turn the boat around, I felt the grip of death loosen and fall away. My present experience is of living in a barely working physical vehicle. Taking no less than 7 medications, I walk the razor's edge between doing too much and not doing enough. The one thing that has never changed throughout this experience is my dedication to helping the wanderers of this planet. All the various skills that I've had to give up have their place in my work with people who are having trouble with their spiritual path, and so I feel fully useful at last. And yet I know that we are all most useful, not by what we do or say, but in the quality of our being. Session 22, February 10th, 1981. Questioner. The instrument would like to ask a couple of questions of you. The instrument would like to know why she smells the incense at various times during the day at various places. Ra. I am Ra. This instrument has spent a lifetime in dedication to service. This has brought this instrument to this nexus in space-time, with the conscious and unconscious distortion towards service, with the further conscious distortion towards service by communication. Each time, as you would put it, that we perform this working, our social memory complex vibrational distortion meshes more firmly with this instrument's unconscious distortions towards service. Thus, we are becoming a part of this instrument's vibratory complex and it a part of ours. This occurs upon the unconscious level, the level whereby the mind is gone down through to the roots of consciousness, which you may call cosmic. This instrument is not consciously aware of this slow changing of the meshing vibratory complex. However, as the dedication on both levels continues, and the workings continue, there are signals sent from the unconscious in a symbolic manner. Because this instrument is extremely keen in its sense of smell, this association takes place unconsciously, and the thought form of this odor is witnessed by the entity. Questioner. Secondly, she would like to know why she feels more healthy now that she has begun these sessions and feels more healthy as time goes on. Ra. I am Ra. This is a function of the free will of the entity. This entity has, for many of your years, prayed a certain set of sound vibration complexes before opening to communication. Before the trance state was achieved, this prayer remained within the conscious portion of the mind complex and, though helpful, was not as effective as the consequence of this prayer, as you would call this vibrational sound complex, which then goes directly into the unconscious level, thus more critically affecting the communication from the spiritual complex. Also, this entity has begun, due to this working, to accept certain limitations which it placed upon itself in order to set the stage for services such as it now performs. This also is an aid to realigning the distortions of the physical complex with regard to pain. The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 12, Session 23, February 11th, 1981. Jim. Dr. Puharich never did visit us during the Ra contact, so all of our questions about how he should prepare for joining the contact were only for our information. His strong desire to solve riddles and puzzles and his desire to prove spiritual truth would have made it difficult for him to become a part of our circle, since it was supported by the opposite mental attitude, faith. Carla. Once one starts watching for synchronicities, One can find many a book, movie, or any other object or event bringing repeated messages and reminders of our path. So often, Jim and I will be discussing an issue only to find that for the next day or two, we receive confirmations meaningful only to us. And I do think that many wanderers here are making today's movies and songs. One has only to listen to the wonderful words to current songs sung by people as diverse as Arlo Guthrie and Donovan, Black Oak, Arkansas, and Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Rolling Stones. The list is as long as my legs. We have wonderful company, we who wander here on Earth. Session 23, February 11th, 1981. Questioner. I can't answer this question, but I will ask it anyways since we're in the area that I think this occurred in. I feel this is somewhat of a duty to ask this question because Henry Puharich will be visiting us here later this month. Was this entity involved in any of these times of which you have just spoken? Ra. I am Ra. You are quite correct in your assumption that we can speak in no way concerning the entity Henry. If you will consider this entity's distortions with regard to what you call proof, you will grasp our predicament. Questioner. I had assumed before I asked the question that that would be the answer. I only asked it for his benefit because he wished for me to. This may be a dumb question. There's a movie called Battle Beyond the Stars. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. I guess you are. It just seemed to have what you were telling us included in the script. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This particular creation of your entities had some distortions of the law of one and its scenario upon your physical plane. This is correct. The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 13, Session 24, February 15th, 1981. Jim. The following information refers to two of the most widely rumored events in ufology in this country. The first refers to the supposed face-to-face meeting between extraterrestrials and then-President Dwight D. Eisenhower and some senior military staff at Edwards Air Force Base in California in February 1954. The second incident refers to the supposed crash of a UFO outside of Roswell, New Mexico, in which the UFOnauts on board supposedly died. It is further rumored that their bodies were stored in Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio. Once again, we encountered the temptation to pursue information that seemed on the surface to be extremely interesting, but which, in truth, would yield little or no information which might aid in the evolution of mind, body, or spirit. And we would have lost the Ra contact because Ra's narrowband contact was focused only on aiding our evolution and not on revealing the transient intricacies of how groups play games in this illusion. Carla. In 1962, when I joined with Donald to help make up the initial meditation group, which grew into L&L Research, there were several rumors being brunted about. Supposedly, the government knew all about UFOs, had contact. There were alleged conspiracies that various sources warned the public about. To this day, there has continued a steady stream of such prophecies and doomsday warnings of all kinds. Only the dates of Armageddon have changed, usually predicting doom within the next 2 or 3 years. It is not that I do not think UFOs are communicating with our government. They might be. Certainly they are here. The landing trace cases alone prove that something that makes dents in the ground is visiting us, and the many witnesses and abductees create a comprehensive picture of human-alien contact that is undeniable. It is that I feel that the real treasure of the UFO entities have brought us are those of the spirit, not those of this world. Whatever the physical reality of UFOs and governmental doings, they remain part of the transient world picture, part of this heavy illusion. But the messages have a metaphysical content that 10,000 years would not make out of date or less meaningful. So I tend to respond to people's questions about such hijinks as these with a redirection, back from phenomena to metaphysical truth. Session 24, February 15th, 1981. Questioner. One thing that has been bothering me that I was just reading about is not too important, but I would really be interested in knowing if Dwight Eisenhower met with either the Confederation or the Orion Group in the 1950s. Ra. I am Ra. The one of which you speak met with thought forms which are indistinguishable from third density. This was a test. We, the Confederation, wished to see what would occur if this extremely positively oriented and simple congenial person with no significant distortion towards power happened to cross peaceful information and the possibilities which might append therefrom. We discovered that this entity did not feel that those under his care could deal with the concepts of other beings and other philosophies. Thus, an agreement reached then allowed him to go his way, ourselves to do likewise, and a very quiet campaign, as we have heard you call it, be continued alerting your peoples to our presence gradually. Events have overtaken this plan. Is there any short query before we close? Questioner. Another question with that is, was there a crashed spaceship with small bodies now stored in our military installations? Ra. I am Ra. We do not wish to infringe upon your future. Gave we you this information, we might be giving you more than you could appropriately deal with in the space-time nexus of your present, somewhat muddled configuration of military and intelligence thought. Therefore, we shall withhold this information. The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 14, Session 25, February 16th, 1981. Jim. The following information gave us some insight into how one's choices can be used in either the positive or the negative sense, even when there is the seeming interference of negative entities in the manner of what many light workers call psychic attack, and what we came to call psychic greetings. We chose the term greeting to emphasize that there does not have to be a negative experience on the part of the one who is greeted, and that the experience that the one who is greeted actually has is in direct proportion to how that entity looks at the situation. If one wishes to see such a greeting as a difficult attack, then that becomes the experience. One can, however, also choose to see the Creator in all entities and events, and can praise and seek the light within any situation, and then that will tend to become the experience. When this latter choice is made, the psychic greeting becomes a great blessing in that it presents to the one who is greeted an intensive opportunity to see the one Creator where it may be more difficult to see, and which, when accomplished, develops a great deal more spiritual strength than may normally be developed without the negative entity's aid in pointing out the weaker areas of our magical personalities. Psychic greetings can only be offered by negative entities enhancing our own free will choices that are distorted towards service to self thought and behavior. Our poor choices, usually reflecting a lack of love towards another or the self, get magnified by the negative entity and bleed away our efforts to seek the light and serve others until we are able to balance the situation with love, acceptance, compassion, tolerance, and the light touch. This is why Jesus said to resist not evil. To resist and fight is to see someone or something as other than the self, as other than the one Creator. That is the negative path. The positive path sees and loves all as the self and as the one. Carla. The work that was perforce mine during this time of psychic greeting was, as Jim pointed out, very helpful in focusing my will and attention. I remember feeling tremendously uplifted and held in safe hands through all of the episodes. The key was the surrender to seeing one's own dark side. I think Dion Fortune's description of how to deal with a vampiric entity, in that case a wolf, still to be the most direct example of the understanding needed to move through such times. This wise soul had a wolf appearing at her bed during a training in white Western ritual magic. The solution was to draw the wolf directly into the breast, loving it and accepting it as self. Against fearless love, the powers of negation and death are helpless and melt away. I think those of Ra were very careful of our group, compared to some sources, who did not show much concern that they were wearing the instrument out, Advice such as was given for me could well apply to anyone who must husband one's energy. Session 25, February 16th, 1981. Questioner: what cause or complex of causes has led to the instrument's chest cold, as it is called? Ra: I am Ra. This distortion towards illness was caused by the free will of the instrument in accepting a chemical substance, which you call LSD. This was carefully planned by those entities which do not desire this instrument to remain viable. The substance has within it the facility of removing large stores of vital energy from the ingester. The first hope of the Orion entity which arranged this opportunity was that this instrument would become less polarized towards what you call the positive. Due to conscious efforts upon the part of this instrument, using the substance as a programmer for service to others and for thankfulness, this instrument was spared this distortion, and there was no result satisfactory to the Orion group. The second hope lay in the possible misuse of the most powerful means of transmission of energy between your peoples in the area of body complex distortions. We have not previously spoken of the various types of energy blockages and transfers, positive and negative, that may take place due to participation in your sexual reproductive complex of actions. This entity, however, is a very strong entity with very little distortion from universal green ray love energy. Thus, this particular plan was not affected either, as the entity continued to give of itself in this context in an open or green ray manner, rather than attempting to deceive or to manipulate other self. The only remaining distortion available, since this entity would not detune and would not cease sharing love universally under this chemical substance, was simply to drain this entity of as much energy as possible. This entity has a strong distortion towards busyness, which it has been attempting to overcome for some time, realizing it not to be the appropriate attitude for this work. In this particular area, the ingestion of this substance did indeed, shall we say, cause distortions away from viability due to the busyness and lack of desire to rest, this instrument staying alert for much longer than appropriate. Thus, much vital energy was lost, making this instrument unusually susceptible to infections such as it now experiences. Questioner: the second question that the instrument requested is, how may I best revitalize myself, not only now but in the future? Ra: I am Ra. This instrument is aware of the basic needs of its constitution, those being meditation, acceptance of limitations, experiences of joy through association with others, and with the beauty as of the singing, and the exercising with great contact, whenever possible, with the life forces of second density, especially those of trees. This entity also needing to be aware of the moderate but steady intake of foodstuffs, exercise being suggested at a fairly early portion of the day and at a later portion of the day before the resting. Questioner: the third question that she requested was, how may Don and Jim help to revitalize me? Ra: I am Ra. This is not an appropriate question for full answer. We can say only that these entities are most conscientious. We may add that due to this instrument's distortion towards imbalance in the space-time nexus, it would be well were this entity accompanied during exercise.